but then we're going to look at alternative hypothesis to all the facts, okay? Because Christians say the best explanation for the 5 facts is the resurrection of Jesus. But then critical, people have other theories too. So we will have to look at their way of explaining away the facts. So we will look at those theories as well. All right, so that's premise 4. So in our argument, we are in the final premise. The first 3 premises we have concluded that the answer is in the affirmative. So the final premise, if we can conclude that the resurrection hypothesis performs, or it outperforms all the other hypotheses, then we can say that the explanation for all the 5 facts, the best explanation is the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. So the first theory we will look at is called the swoon theory. Okay. Now we will first of all look at what this theory is and how much of the facts can it actually explain. Now what is the swoon theory? That's the first thing we will look at. Now according to the swoon theory, Jesus never died in the first place. He only swooned. Now what do you mean by swooning? It means he didn't show any visible life signs but was still alive when he was placed in the tomb. After several hours, he was revived by the cool air of the tomb. He got up, took off his burial cloth and departed. That's the theory. Okay, so basically swooning means some sort of a fainting. Okay, so Jesus fainted while he was on the cross, like he was completely unconscious, and they took him down when he was unconscious, put him in the tomb, and then after a few hours he just regained consciousness, got off, he left the tomb, and he went and met his disciples. And then the disciples concocted the theory that Jesus rose from the dead. Is the theory clear to you? This is the swoon theory. Now, on the face of it, it seems so funny, right? How could people even think like this? But we've got to respond. So, we're going to respond to the swoon theory. Now, the evidence for the swoon theory before we respond, they will basically say something like this. Medical knowledge was not that great in the first century to an extent where they could not make out the difference between a dead person and an unconscious person. And therefore, they mistook the unconsciousness of Jesus to his death. So he was actually unconscious, he fainted, he was brought down and then put in a tomb and then later revived inside the tomb and then he departed out of the tomb. That's the swoon theory. The evidence for it is to imagine that the medical knowledge at that point in time was not that great. Secondly, also in Mark 15:44 we see that Pontius Pilate was surprised. When he heard the news that Jesus was dead, this is what he says. He says, "Did he die so soon?" So people who are sympathetic to the swoon theory will say the fact that Pontius Pilate was surprised by the death of Jesus points to the fact that usually those who are crucified will not die as early as Jesus did, and therefore they would argue that the swoon theory has some sort of a credibility. Now we're going to analyze the swoon theory. Okay, we're going to look at some of the fatal flaws in the swoon theory. Firstly, could it be that the Roman gods mistakenly declared Jesus dead? How plausible is the fact that the Roman gods were mistaken? Now, scholars, particularly scholar Peter Kreeft writes this. He says, Romans were professional executioners. Roman procedures were very careful to make sure that the capital prisoner was dead. Roman law even laid the death penalty on any soldier who let a capital prisoner escape in any way. This includes blundering a crucifixion. It was never done. Never has a person who's under capital punishment escaped death. Roman law is very, very strict on that. So given the Roman law, given the military discipline of the Roman military system, it is very unlikely that they would have made a mistake in their judgment. That's the first thing. Secondly, we'll have to ask the question again, did Jesus have a chance to survive the crucifixion? Now, in the first session, we looked at the sequence of events that Jesus went through. He was flogged, and then he carried his own cross, he was crucified. All that he went through, do you think he has a chance to survive the crucifixion? That's a crucial question we need to ask. And all the medical evidence points to the fact that Jesus Christ died by crucifixion. Scholars would say once you are on the cross for even 1 hour means you're already dead. You can't survive the crucifixion for more than 1 hour. And so this theory flies out of all commonsensical things that you can come up with. Thirdly, let's assume that Jesus Christ somehow survived the crucifixion. How did he get out of the tomb? Now we are looking at a person whose flesh was ripped out of his body. He was beaten to such an extent that his bones were visible. His face was so marred and disfigured that people could not even make out, could not even find out whether this person was, who he was. To such an extent, he was beaten and tortured. After that, not to forget the crown of thorns on his head, which means the thorns, pierced the head so much that, maybe even some part of flesh underneath the strong part of the brain even coming out, blood oozing from the head, blood oozing from all parts of the body, right? Not to forget the wounds he has on his wrists and his feet, not to forget the holes he has in his lungs and heart. Okay? Now, think about this, okay? A person who's bleeding continuously, a person who cannot breathe properly because of the spear to his side, which has pierced the lungs and heart. Okay? Now, in order for that person to get out of the tomb, what should he do? Firstly, get up and then take out the burial cloth around him. Scholars say the burial cloth is so long. Usually, according to the Jewish custom, they tie the person very tightly. So imagine yourself, you're completely tied. Okay, to your hands, legs, body, face, everything is tied, and you're already a medical patient now. How could he have taken the burial cloth out by himself? Okay, we're not talking about a healthy person. Even a healthy person, is difficult for a healthy person to do it. You think a person with a hole in his heart, a person whose flesh is ripped apart, his eyes are beaten, there's blood oozing from the head. A person with such deformity, do you think can take the burial cloth out by himself? It is not possible. The question is, where will he get all this strength from to take it out? To take the burial cloth out from his body is literally impossible. Okay, even if you grant that he's taken the burial cloth out by himself. Now, what is protecting the tomb? There is a stone. Do you think a person with a hole in his heart and body bruised all over, right, blood gushing out of his body, such a person can roll the stone by himself? Remember, it is sealed. The stone is sealed. How likely is it that he moved the stone by himself? And there is this beautiful passage, I think in John, where 3 women together were not able to roll the stone over. A stone that could not be moved by 3 women, do you think a person with a hole in his heart and a bruised body and bruised head would be able to do it? He Could not. And so I think the swoon theory does not make sense. And even if you grant that, what are the gods doing outside? Do you think they'll allow Jesus to roll the stone and simply walk away? Even if that's the case, do you think that this person would be able to fight the Roman gods and escape? Remember, there's extra protection too. Once the Jews informed Pontius Pilate about the things that could happen, right? What did Pontius Pilate do? He, gave extra protection. He said, take another, Roman guard with you to make sure that no one, no one steals the body. So there was extra police protection. Do you think a swooning corpse in Jesus would be able to defeat these, professional military men and escape? It is not plausible at all. And even if you agree to that, how could he be well the next day? There are instances where, after the appearances of Jesus, when he appeared before them, he was completely well, right? Think about, he walked with, the two disciples on the road to Emmaus. For how long? 4 miles. In miles, right? 7 miles. It's 7 miles, yeah. Now think about this. How many of you have had, surgeries in your body, or maybe even some minor surgery? You will know how long it will take to recover. Let's forget surgery, okay? How many of you have had thorn wounds in your feet? Most of us, if you didn't have thorn wounds, it means you did not play while you were young. Right? How long would it take for you to recover? Now you have a person whose lungs there's holes in his lungs, there's holes in the heart, body bruised to such an extent where the bones are itself being seen. Such a person, how can he be well the next day? Because he seemed to be totally fine when he walked along with the disciples. He walked 7 miles. What do you do with a heart patient? You give him rest, right? So a person like Jesus, or what Jesus went through, it is never possible for him to be well the next day. But when he appeared to the disciples, or allegedly appeared to the disciples, he seemed to be totally fine, right? He ate with them, right? He walked with them, which basically tells us that if he was really, swooned, and put in the tomb and then later recovered, he could certainly not be well the next day. Now, even if that is the case, where did he go after 40 days? Remember, people saw Jesus only for 40 days. After 40 days, he was not seen. Right? What happened to him after 40 days? Think about this. Even if one person saw Jesus after 40 days, the theory of the resurrection would have been completely shut off. The fact that no one saw Jesus after 40 days means after 40 days he was not present at all. The fact of the matter is that after 40 days he ascended into heaven. That is why they did not see him. Alright, so the swoon theory does not make sense. Firstly, for the simple fact that Jesus' death by crucifixion is a fact that literally all scholars agree. So the very fact that Jesus died, scholars agree to the fact is that the swoon theory is false. But even if you concede the fact that Jesus did not die, it still does not make sense to believe in the swoon theory. Because Jesus could never have come out of the tomb by himself. He could have, never been well the next day. Any person in the right common sense would not agree to the swoon theory. We have another theory that explains the facts, at least according to those sympathetic people. That is the conspiracy theory. Now, what is the conspiracy theory? The conspiracy theory is basically that the disciples came and stole the body, right? They stole the body of Jesus from the tomb, and then they fabricated the lie of the resurrection. Okay, this is at that particular point in time probably the most popular theory. Right? In fact, in Matthew chapter 28 itself, you will see the birth of this theory. And here you will see a beautiful conversation going on between the Roman gods and the Jewish leaders. I'm not going to read the passage, I will just explain it to you. The passage is basically to say that the leaders have discovered that the tomb is empty. So immediately they go to the Jewish leaders. And the Jewish leaders, they give the Roman gods a suggestion. They tell them, go and tell the Roman leaders that, while they were asleep, the disciples of Jesus came and stole the body. And if at all there becomes an issue with this, we will take care of it. That's the birth of the conspiracy theory, okay, which says that the disciples stole Jesus' body and then they lied about the resurrection. Now, how plausible is this conspiracy theory? We will look at the plausibility of this theory. Now, we look at it in two steps. Okay, first is, was Jesus' body stolen? Because that's the first part of the conspiracy theory. Then, could it be that the disciples fabricated this lie? We will look at whether the disciples lied or not. Firstly, we look at whether the disciples stole the body. So we look at the reasons why the disciples did not steal the body of Jesus. Okay, so the first reason, there was much precaution by the Roman officials themselves to secure the tomb so that no one steals the body. That's the first point. Protection was already given that no one should steal it. Right, the passage that we just read, right? The Jews come and they tell Pontius Pilate, saying that Jesus, while he was alive, told the people that he might rise from the dead on the third day. So make sure nothing of such kind happens. And so the Roman leaders said, okay, we'll make sure that nothing happens. We will put an additional guard to protect the tomb. And so two precautionary things were done. One is extra police protection was given. Secondly, the stone was sealed to the tomb. And so with this protection, it is hard to believe that Jesus' body was stolen. Now, secondly, it is very funny because the explanation that the Jewish leaders gave the Roman soldiers is very funny. They said, go and tell the Roman leaders that while you were sleeping, the disciples stole the body. Does anyone see a problem in that? Because how do you know what happened when you are sleeping? Right? When you are sleeping, how do you know that the disciples came and stole the body? Right? If you are sleeping, you will not know that, right? And here you have the Roman God sleeping and yet knowing the fact that the disciples came and stole the body, which is unthinkable. Why would you even say that, right? Because when you sleep, you don't know what is happening, right? So this is totally ridiculous to believe. Now, also we should understand that the Roman guards would not sleep on duty, because there is clear evidence from Roman law that if you are a Roman guard on duty and you slept, what will happen to you? What will happen? You will be killed. It is death punishment for you. So while on duty, if you are asleep, it is problem for you. Right? And so the Roman law is very strict. Military discipline in the Roman military system is so strict, and the Roman guards would not fall asleep, especially when this is a high profile case. Right? The death of Jesus, the crucifixion of Jesus was not an ordinary crucifixion. He was crucified as a criminal, right? And he was under capital punishment, and so it was a high profile case, right? Now, I don't know how many of you have followed some capital punishment of high profile cases, even in our government systems, right? Now, I have watched a documentary on the capital punishment of who's this person? John Pandian, right? The person who was involved in serial rape and murder cases in Chennai, was put to death by hanging by the government of India. His final mercy plea was also rejected by the government, and then he was put to death. Right? Now, if he was he was in the jail, next day he is going to be, hanged to death, you see the amount of protection for him, right? There were guards outside the tomb, outside the jail, right? So basically you see a person under the capital punishment is put under like a Z category protection. And so here you have Jesus, a high profile case. Do you think that the guards would sleep on duty? No way. And again, as I said, if you are sleeping, how will you know? And also, even if you are sleeping, someone else took it. Now, when you try to move the stone, will it not be noticeable? The Roman guards are out. You cannot secretly steal the body, right? Because you will have to move the stone. When you move the stone, what will happen? You will create noise. And the noise that you create will wake the Roman guards. And once the Roman guards are awake, you will be caught, right? And so the explanation is silly. And also, you see the grave clothes. The Bible says in John 26:7, the grave clothes that was tied around, that was put across the body of Jesus, was folded properly and kept. Now here is the question. Now if the disciples have come to steal the body and go, do you think that they will fold the burial cloths, arrange it neatly and then go? They will not. Imagine you go to steal in a house. Okay, I'm sure you will not do. Okay. Imagine you go to steal something from a house. Let's say there is something in a wardrobe. Okay. Now, as you steal whatever you want, imagine like few clothes just fall off the wardrobe. What will you do with the clothes that fell off the wardrobe? You will sometimes leave it like that itself, or take it and put it inside the wardrobe and run away. Your objective is to flee from the place as quickly and as early as possible. Would you in your right senses say that, okay, maybe the clothes are not folded properly, maybe I should take the time to sit and fold it properly and put it in the wardrobe neatly and then run away? You will not do that, right? Especially if you are coming to steal something. Now you see the scene inside the tomb is so neat and perfect that the grave clothes, that was kept separately. The cloth that was around the head was separate, around the body was separate, and it was all folded. Now folding the grave clothes is also not easy because they're quite long. Now how many of you have put those that crepe bandages when you get hurt in your leg, right? Now those of you who played, right, when you tie those crepe bandages, once the game is over, you remove it. Like, how much time will it take for you to fold it properly? It will take time. When I used to play, that is the worst part of the time. I simply throw it and I run. I want someone else to fold and wrap the bandage around for me so that when I go to play the next day, I can take it and wrap it. Right? So you see the scene, the scenery, the entire scene of the empty tomb, right, is a very good testimony that the body was not stolen, right? If it was stolen, the clothes will not be the way they were. And also, where did the disciples get the courage to steal the body? Now we'll have to think about it. Now there's this famous passage in Mark 14 about Peter, right? Before the death of Jesus, what did the disciples do? How are they? Remember when the Roman soldiers came and caught Jesus on the Passover night? What did the followers of Jesus do? They all ran away. There is even an instance where one person ran naked. He said, my clothes are not important for me, my life is important for me. He left the clothes and he started to run. The disciples all were afraid. And think about Peter. That's an interesting case. Maybe we can even read that passage. Someone read Mark 14, 66 to 72. Mark 14, 66 to 72. Yes. Mark 14, 66.
While Peter was alone in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she looked closely at him. You also were with the Nazarene, Jesus, she said. But he denied it. I don't know or understand what you are talking about, he said, and went out into the entrance.
Yeah, continue.
When the servant girl saw him, then she said again to those standing around them, this fellow is one of them. Again he denied it. After a little while, those standing near said to Peter, surely you are one of them, for you are the Galilean. He began to call down curses, and he swore to them, I don't know this man you are talking about. Immediately the cock crowed the second time. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken to him, before the cock crows twice, you will disown me 3 times. And he broke down and wept.
Thank you. Now this is a wonderful passage. Now I want you to listen very, very closely to this. Now Peter denies Jesus 3 times. But denying is one thing, but the words that Peter spoke must have broken Jesus' heart. Now think about this. Think about the relationship between Peter and Jesus. Remember the instances where Peter said, I will not let anything happen to you. Right? I'm willing to, take even my sword for you. But Peter denies him 3 times. But more than Peter's denial of Jesus, the words he uses are even more painful. The first word he uses is, he says, I don't know this man. Just imagine the kind of intimate relationship Peter and Jesus had. How many evangelistic ministries they both would have gone together. How many close conversations, heart-to-heart conversations they must have had. For Peter to say, I don't know this person, would have shattered Jesus' heart. Think about it yourself. Imagine your close friend, or you even a family member, after having spent quality time with each other, if the other person says, just to save his skin, I don't know this person, how would you feel about it? Right? But that was those were the words of Peter. He says, I don't know this man. Now this man is another important thing that you'll have to think about. He calls Jesus whom? What does he call Jesus? Man. This is the same Peter who said, on the Mount of Transfiguration, right? That he will say, we have the prophets, we have Jesus, it's all fine, this is wonderful, we do not want to get out of this. He called Jesus the Son of God. He called Jesus the Son of Man. Now this Peter, who claimed Jesus to be God and the Messiah, is calling him a man. Now I don't know how many of you watched the Passion of the Christ movie. Have you watched it? Now this scene is a very touching scene where when Peter denies him 3 times, between the 2 bodies, Jesus, this broken, bleeding body of Jesus, he will look at Peter like this. Have you, can you recall that picture in your mind? Think about you hearing the person whom you love deny you right when you can hear him. How shattering it would be. We don't know whether that is true or not, whether Jesus really, heard Peter deny him. But the fact that he was able to deny the divinity of Jesus, after saying, God, you are this, you are that, when Jesus performed his miracles, when he walked on water, when he healed the sick, all the disciples were going gaga over it. Particularly Peter. Called him, surely you are the Son of God. Now telling, first of all he said, I don't know this man. Secondly, he says, he calls Jesus, whom he believed in his heart to be God, he called him a man. These words would have shattered Jesus. It would have broken Jesus' heart. I think more than the physical beatings he endured, the emotional beatings were much more serious for him. Peter denied him. And that is why you will see the last part of the verse, the 72nd verse, Peter could not control his tears. He could not bear what he did. When the cock crowed for the third time, he realized what he had done. That is, he had betrayed, he had denied the very person who had given him life. And that is why he was uncontrollable. Right? And so you see, the bottom line is the disciples were all afraid. Peter was the leader of the disciples, right? Was running for his life. He denied everything, every relationship he had with Jesus. That was the emotional state in which the disciples were. Now, do you think such group, running and hiding for the fear of Jews, will have the courage to steal Jesus' body and escape the Roman soldiers? Do you think that is plausible? No way the disciples would steal. They would be the last people to steal. They had no courage. In fact, on Sunday morning, it was not the male disciples who ran to find out whether Jesus was alive or not. It were the women. It was the women who ran to see what happened to Jesus. These fellows were hiding. Right? It was the women who were the brave ones and not the men. And so there is no reason to believe that the disciples had the courage to steal the body. And also, why would they steal the body? What reason do they have to steal the body? That is also an important question. Why would they steal it? And also, concoct this conspiracy theory. Why would they have to concoct this conspiracy theory? Now, for any sin that you do or for any act you do which is wrong, right, there are fundamentally only three reasons. Okay? There are only three reasons for which you will commit any wrong thing. One is for money. Second is for power. Or third is for sex. These are fundamentally the only, you look at any crime, these three will probably be one of the reasons. Or one of the three will be the reasons, or all three will be involved. You get money out of this, or you get power out of this, or you get the pleasures of sex out of it. Okay? So now here you have a stealing happening. What did the disciples get out of it? Or what did the disciples think they will get out of it? Do you think they believe they'll get money by fabricating this story? Do you think they got any money because they spread the message that Jesus rose from the dead? Okay. Do you think they got some sort of a power because they spread the message of Jesus' resurrection? In fact, they were rejected, they were ostracized, they were beaten, they were put to death, right? All brutality was exposed upon these disciples, and yet they would not recant. They did not get any power. They did not get any sexual pleasures also by saying this message. And yet they proclaimed the truth of the resurrection of Jesus, and they were killed for it. Okay? Now just imagine in your mind Peter, who is the leader of the disciples, coming to all the other disciples and saying, let's, for example, take John as an example. Says, hey John, I have a wonderful idea, man. Now that our Lord is killed, why don't we do this? Our plan is this. We will steal the body of Jesus, okay? And we will tell the world that he rose from the dead. Okay? And then John says, that's a wonderful idea, Peter. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? What are we going to get out of this? By stealing Jesus' body, what are we going to get? Then Peter says, by stealing his body and spreading or fabricating the lie of the resurrection of Jesus, we are going to be beaten, tortured, rejected, ostracized, punished, exiled, beaten, persecuted, finally even killed. Then John saying, what a wonderful idea, Peter. Let's join the team. Come on, why didn't you tell us earlier? Let's all join and let's fabricate this story and tell the world that Jesus rose from the dead. Do you think this is logical? Anyone in the right frame of mind who think that by telling a lie or by stealing they're going to get any of these things would be totally rejected. They had no reason. The disciples had absolutely no reason to fabricate this story. No reason at all. No money, no power, no sex. These are fundamentally the three reasons why anyone would involve in any crime at all. Disciples got none of these. Okay, so maybe the disciples did not steal the body. What about perhaps the Jews? But why would the Jews steal the body and concoct the story of the resurrection? Because the number one enemy for the Christians were the Jews. Or maybe was it the Romans? Now, why would the Romans steal the body? Right? Because one of the main reason why Jesus was put to death was sedition. Right? Why would the Romans do it? There is no reason to believe that the Romans would do it and destroy the peace that is already there. Now, Palestine was a very volatile area, and there were constant reminders not to engage in any sort of religious and philosophical fight in that place, right? And so there is no reason for the Romans to steal the body. So the disciples could never have stolen the body. They don't have any reason. In fact, it is literally implausible that they stole the body. The Jews could not have done it. The Romans could not have done it. So the theory that the disciples stole the body can never be accepted. And think about the disciples. Could they have conspired this entire thing? Right? We already saw that they could not have done it because they don't get anything out of it. There is no reason for them to do it. But could it be that they have conspired? And here you look at, a famous detective, who talks about what it takes to, be a successful conspirator, or what involves successful conspiracy. If you want to successfully, conspire something, what are some of the characteristics? Number one, the team that conspires should be a small one. The number of conspirators should be small. Now, suppose if you are planning to rob a bank, the smaller your team is, the better the success rate. Right? If more people know about your stealing, probably you will get caught. So the number of conspirators should be as less as possible. Secondly, the people involved in the conspiracy should be having enough communication. Right? You should be able to communicate easily. Okay? And also the conspiracy, that is the lie or whatever you're trying to say, should be there only for a short span of time. Because the longer you have to maintain the lie or to protect yourself from the wrong you did, the probability for you getting caught is a lot more. So the time span should be short. Fourthly, significant relational connections. Conspiracy people, scholars who say successful conspiracy theories will mostly involve blood relations, because they are the ones who are, most likely to not give up on their brothers or sisters or family. Okay, and finally, no matter how much pressure you apply, they should, not be in a point of breaking the conspiracy. Right? So if there is more pressure, applied upon them to break out the conspiracy theory, the more likely it is to get caught. So in all these 5 characteristics, the disciples are not fit people to have successfully pulled off the conspiracy. The number of conspirators were too many. How many people witnessed the rising of Jesus from the dead? 500. More than 500, right? So many people cannot be involved in a conspiracy. One person at least will tell the truth, right? Secondly, communication. Was there, good communication between the disciples? At that point in time, they were close, but once the church was dispersed, they went to different parts of the world, right? Communication was not there. When they write their gospels, Matthew, where was Matthew when he was writing his gospel? Where was he? Huh? Matthew was in Jerusalem. Where was Mark? Mark was in North Africa. Where was Peter? When of course, Peter, Gospel of Mark, okay, fine. Rome, little bit Jerusalem. But then you basically see that the disciples were in different parts. And yet when they write their Gospels, the passion narrative is all the same. The information they give is the same. So you see that, it could not be concocted. Thirdly, short time span. The time span for these disciples were not short, it was long. Right? They could not have maintained the life for a very long time. Especially, the fifth point is that they were beaten and tortured. Now, how likely is it that you will not, tell the truth even after being beaten and tortured for such a long time? Now, I don't know how many of you have been to police stations for telling a lie or stealing something, right? I hope none of you. But if you have heard about people who have gone through those experiences, they will tell you the very first beating you get inside the police station itself, you will tell all the truth. Right? I've heard, I know a close friend of mine who has been to a police station, who thought that he will be able to get away with what he did. But with the very first beating, he could not survive. They will rip you apart, take your flesh and bones. Right? So when you are under huge pressure, you will easily tell the truth. But you see the disciples, they were willing to go to any extent, no matter how much persecution, no matter how much torture, no matter even death, they did not change their message. They said, we witnessed the risen Lord. And that is a fact. No matter what you do to us, that is not going to change. But if they knew in their hearts that what they were believing was a lie, they would never have been willing to give up their life for that. And so you see, successful conspiracies has all these characteristics, and none of them apply to Jesus, the disciples. And therefore the disciples could never have conspired the death of Jesus. The resurrection of Jesus. And then we come to the famous substitute theory. And this theory is quite often made by our Muslim brothers, right? They also believe, in fact, in Surah chapter 4, verses 157 and 158, it says that they killed him, referring to Jesus, they killed him not, nor crucified him. Remember the first fact? But this is what the Quran says. They killed him not, nor crucified him, but so it was made to appear to them, and those who differ therein are full of doubts, with no certain knowledge, but only conjecture to follow. For of a surety they killed him not. No, Allah raised him up into himself, and Allah is exalted in power, wise. So basically the point is, the Quran says Jesus did not die. In fact, he was not even crucified. But instead of him, there was a substitute. Okay? Now, is this substitute theory plausible? Okay? The reason why we can reject the substitute theory is, first of all, the Quran is a document that comes 600 years after the time of Jesus. What credibility do you have for a document that talks about an event 600 years after the event is over? Okay? The documents in the first century tell you that Jesus was crucified. Right? You have a document written 600 years later telling that Jesus was not crucified. How likely is the Quran to be credible on this matter? It is not credible, at least when compared to the documents of the New Testament, it is not credible. Secondly, do you think that the eyewitnesses, those people who saw Jesus dying on the cross, are mistaken? Do you think that they could not make out the difference between Jesus and the substitute who was put in his place? It is like saying, just imagine this to be the case. Let's say, Nathuram Godse, who killed Mahatma Gandhi, right, thought he killed Gandhi, but he did not kill Gandhi. How likely is that to be true? That he was actually mistaken, that his identity was mistaken. No way people can mistake the identity of a particular person who is killed, right? Especially you have all these Roman guards, you have so many people, you have so many witnesses, so many eyewitnesses who saw the death of Jesus. How likely it is that they mistake the identity of Jesus? So it is not probable that they mistook the identity of Jesus. But they also have the empty tomb problem. Now, if it was a substitute that took the place of Jesus, why is the tomb empty? Did he rise from the dead? Did the substitute rise from the dead? Or what happened to the substitute? That's a huge problem for the Quran, right? The substitute could never have taken the place of Jesus. Okay, let's leave the Bible aside. What about the non-Christian sources that we talked about this morning? What about those sources that tell us that Jesus died by crucifixion? Right? We have information from non-Christian sources talking about the death of Jesus by crucifixion. Are we to say that those people are also involved in the conspiracy? No way. So the substitute theory is not believable at all. Now next we come to the famous hallucination theory. Okay, it is basically to attack the fourth fact. It is to say that the appearances, the disciples and the followers of Jesus, they thought that they saw the real Jesus, but they were only hallucinating. So when they say that yes, it could be that Jesus appeared to those people, but those were only hallucinations. Now the justification for the hallucination theory is basically to say that whenever some people experience the loss of their loved one, they, for a small period of time, their mind will play games with them. They think that they're actually talking to them, they're actually seeing those people, but in fact they will not be seeing those people. Likewise, the disciples are mourning the loss of their dear friend and loved one in Jesus Christ. They could not bear the loss, and therefore they began to literally hallucinate the presence of Jesus. Right? Now, hallucination is, it almost, it is not something, that does not happen. It happens all the time. I know, in fact, I have a friend who preaches quite a lot. Now, he's got this, hallucination of his smell, right? He does not like the smell of flowers, right? So the moment he smells some flower, he just gets this headache, and sometimes he even throws up. Okay, and this creates lots of problems for him, because when he goes to speak, right, sometimes in the pulpit they have some flowers, or on the stage somewhere for decoration, especially on special occasions you have flowers kept, and so he will not be able to preach there or talk there. All right, so it's a huge problem for him. And so one day he was invited to speak at a church, right, and on the in the pulpit there were some flowers kept. So even before he went to the podium to preach, he told the organizers, would you please take those flowers away, because I have this this issue with flowers. I can't stand the smell of it. I might get headache, I might even vomit, which will put me in a terrible situation. And then they said, okay, fine, we will take it out, and they removed it. Okay, and then they removed it, and then when it was time for him to come to preach, he came and stood behind the podium, and then he started, and less than 1 minute he stopped, and he said to the organizers, I still feel the smell of flowers, and I'm beginning to get a headache. I don't know what to do. And then the organizer said, is it so? I'm so sorry about this, but these are actually plastic flowers. These are not real flowers. They are only plastic. Right? This is hallucination. He was getting a headache for something that was not even there. Now this is hallucination of the smell. Sometimes we have feeling hallucinations, right? You think, there is someone, your phone is ringing, you'll keep your phone on your pocket, you think that your phone is ringing, but actually your phone will not ring, okay? So hallucinations are sometimes natural, okay? But then you will come out of it and you can check whether it is true or not. And it is very true with, death of loved ones, right? People can, I've heard people, say that, my son or a daughter or my father or mother have spoken to me after they are dead, right? Now, it is one thing that the Bible strongly says, that speaking to the dead is not right. You should not attempt to speak to the dead. Let's leave that aside, okay? But they will say that they experienced this, okay? So it could be. But the problem is to say that the disciples were hallucinating, those people who experienced the appearance of Jesus were hallucinating is too much. The reason why we say that is because that hallucinations are primarily subjective. It does not take place in groups. Group hallucinations are not possible. Psychologists will say hallucinations are individual subjective experiences. They are not, they are not collective. Okay? Like for example, it's like dreams. Okay? Let's say you're having a nice dream, right? In your dream, let's say you're having fun with your friend, okay? On a bike ride or a car ride or on a beach or something, having some fun, okay? Then, suddenly you wake up. And you think it will be very interesting if your friend also joins the same dream, right? You wake up your friend and says, hey, come on man, I'm having this dream, we're having fun in Goa, why don't you join me in the dream? Okay? Can both the friends have the same dream on every aspect? They cannot. Like how dreams cannot be collective, hallucinations cannot be collective. They are subjective experiences. Now, if you say 500 people saw Jesus, do you think all those 500 people, they hallucinated on the same thing? By definition, hallucinations are subjective. Now, psychologists believe that hallucinations are only subjective. For example, psychologist Gary Collins says, hallucinations are individual occurrences. By their very nature, only one person can see a given hallucination at a time. They certainly are not something which can be seen by a group of people. Since an hallucination exists only in the subjective personal sense, it is obvious that others cannot witness it. But here you see how many witnesses were there for the risen Jesus. More than 500. And so hallucination theory does not make any sense. But still, there are scholars who say that some sort of a collective hallucinations take place. Like for example, the apparitions of Mary, right? There are instances where it is recorded that groups of people have seen Mary, right? But they say that in those collective hallucinations, there are two factors that are very, very crucial. Number one is expectation. Number two is emotional excitement. That is, the entire group were expecting to see Mary. And secondly, they were all emotionally excited. That is, your emotion is so excited that you're saying, yes, I'm going to see, I'm going to see, I'm going to see. So you have excitement, you have emotional, expectation as well. So with all of this, there is a likelihood of hallucination. But you see, in the case of the disciples, what did they experience? They were not expecting. If they were expecting, what they would have done? They would not have been afraid sitting inside the room. They would have come out and joined the women to look for the empty tomb. They were disillusioned. They were depressed. These are not the characteristics you would see in a collective hallucination. First of all, collective hallucinations are not possible, but even if it is possible, in all those cases you will have expectation and emotional excitement. In the case of the disciples, you had none of them. And therefore the hallucination theory fails. But you have other problems with hallucination. Now if the disciples were really hallucinating, Will the tomb be empty? Will the tomb be empty if they're hallucinating? No, because if they're hallucinating, the body of Jesus is still in the tomb. So you could easily, when you spread the message of the resurrection of Jesus, the people around would say, no, let's come and see. The body of Jesus is still there in the tomb. Right? If you say Jesus rose from the dead, really rose from the dead, you will see the tomb empty. But if you said they were only hallucinating, the body will be there in the tomb. But the tomb was empty. All right? And again, the post 40-day problem. Why didn't the followers of Jesus hallucinate after 40 days? If you said it was the case of hallucination, why did it stop with 40 days? Because only for 40 days people saw Jesus. After 40 days they did not see him. Why hallucination does not work after 40 days or what? Right? So it does not make any sense. Again, the theology problem, I think I've mentioned this earlier. That is, the resurrection for the Jews was always physical and at the end of times. They did not believe in the resurrection of Jesus or anyone, in the middle of history. That's a huge theology problem for the Jews. And then you also have the diversity problem. Now, if you're looking at emotionally excited people, right, only those people have hallucinations. You look at the people that receive, see the appearance of Jesus. How would you explain the appearance to James? He was not excited, emotionally excited. He was not expecting. He did not have that depression, right? Like the disciples, he was a different person, right? So you see people from diverse, circumstances and background experiencing, the resurrection appearance of Jesus. So basically, the hallucination theory does not stand. Primarily because the tomb is empty, but also that hallucinations are subjective experiences. Okay, and finally we come to the myth theory. Okay, now this is one of the questions that you were asking. Now the myth theory basically says that the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ is basically a copy of information from other ancient pagan stories. Right? It's called the myth theory because this story, death and resurrection story, is a myth copied from other mythologies. Okay? So it's basically that the New Testament authors, they did this copying. All right? But how likely is this true? Now, the myth theory is false because of 5 reasons. Number one is that, basically one of the reasons they say it's they believe in the myth theory is because they say that you look at all these parallels you see in these ancient pagan religions, they're all similar. Right? So you see a cult of Mithra, you see the cult of Adonis, Attis, or any other ancient Near Eastern god. There also you will see the concept of dying and rising gods. In Christianity also you see the concept of dying and rising gods. So Christianity has copied the story from them. This is basically the myth theory. Now there are 5 reasons to reject this theory. Firstly, the parallels that they allude to, they are either unclear or they are untrue. The parallels are not clear at all, or sometimes they don't even exist and people make out to, they basically say that it exists. Secondly, literally all of those mythologies, okay, they are written or they are dating for those stories, comes after Christianity. And so, if it is a case of copying, perhaps it is those people copying from Christianity and not the other way around. Okay. Thirdly, those parallels that we're talking about sometimes are not referring to the actual resurrection. Okay. Fourthly, you will not see historical evidence for those things. Right? You like how you see it for Jesus, right? The historical evidence for Jesus, you will not see historical evidence for those figures or those dying and rising gods. And finally, those people who say that you have parallels between Christianity and these religions will not give any causal reasons, or they will not show the causal relationship between copying from this religion to this religion. They will only say that yes, they are similar and therefore they copied. But who did it? How did it happen? When did it happen? They will not respond. So we'll very quickly, go through, at least one example from each case. So most of the parallels I said are unclear. Now you look at the Roman god Mithra, you will see that the parallels are very, very, absurd. They don't even make any sense at all. Right? One case it is to say it is not true, but a lot of the times you will see that the parallels are unclear. Firstly, the information of Mithra comes from AD 200, that is 200 years after Christ, or at least 170 years after Christ. So the copying could have been the opposite way. Secondly, you will see in the cult of Mithra that the god Mithra kills a bull, right? And it is the blood of the bull that will be responsible for the salvation of the world, right? And not the god Mithra itself. The cult of Mithra will say that it is the blood of the bull that will save humanity and not God himself, the slaying of God himself. Whereas the story of Christianity is very, very different. Then we have late testimony, which postdates Christianity. Now, I'll give you just one example. The earliest example of a dying and rising God is from these Greek gods, Attis and Adonis. Now, those dying and rising gods basically, points to the vegetation cycle, right? Summer and winter, right? What happens, in the winter, before the winter starts, the gods die. And then once before the summer comes, the gods rise up again. And so this goes on as a cycle. But the reason why this is problematic is because the first example that we have of a dying and rising God comes from AD 150, which is later than Christianity. So we cannot say Christianity copied from that pagan religion. If at all you see parallel and if at all you see copying, it could be the other way around. Alright, so we have this problem. Again, for lack of time I'm moving. And thirdly, you will not even see actual resurrection, because when it comes to Christianity, the resurrection of Jesus was a physical one. In most of these examples, you will see a resurrection which is not physical, which is not final, which is not eternal also. You will see the resurrection either happening in a cyclical manner, or you will see only the resurrection of the spirit and not the body. Whereas in Christianity, we believe in the resurrection of the body. That is essential. So I'm not going to look into the examples because of lack of time. And then this is very important, lack of historical evidence. As I said, for all these gods that we talked about, there is absolutely no historical evidence at all. Now, you take Roman mythology, Greek mythology, any other ancient Near Eastern mythologies, all of those scholars and people will agree that they are all stories, they are all myths. Only in India, we look at mythology as history. Right? In every other places, all mythologies, right, are considered, to be stories, fictions. Only in India you consider myth to be evidence for any of these gods, right? In fact, are not historical, right? So, even Indian Hindu scholars would reject the historical idea of most of the Puranas. All right. So fundamentally, lack of historical evidence, and finally, the resurrection of Jesus is not a pagan idea. Remember, the Jews were already the chosen people of God. They were asked to not associate with themselves with the pagan belief systems. So for such group of people, why would they want to copy from other religious sources? Specifically, if they have understood themselves to be the like the chosen ones of God, right? And also, no one shows any causal connection between this religion and this, that is copying from one religion to copying to another religion. You don't see any causal connections at all. That is to say, okay, this happened, this copying happened from this book at this time, this person was responsible. Such accurate details are never found. You see similarities in certain religions and you immediately associate that to be copying. And I think that is, very naive on the part of people who propose this theory. So you look at the myth theory, it is not believable at all. So, the death and resurrection of Jesus is not, fiction, it is not myth, it is a fact of history. So, in summary, you see all these theories, none of these theories explain the 5 facts that we talked about. What are those 5 facts? That Jesus died by crucifixion, the burial of Jesus by Joseph of Arimathea, the empty tomb, the resurrection appearances of Jesus to the disciples, and then finally the origin of the Christian faith in the disciples, perspective of the disciples. So we see none of these theories explain the facts. The only theory that comprehensively explains all the 5 facts is the fact that God raised Jesus from the dead. All right. So I think with that I will close. I just have 1 or 2 points to make. With that we can close and we can go for Q&A. So the 4 premises that I talked about, are miracles possible? Yes, they are. Are the New Testaments historically credible? Yes, they are. Are the facts concerning the truth of Jesus Christ, fact of Jesus Christ, are they true? Yes, they are. And which theory or hypothesis best explains the fact? I think the fact that God raised Jesus from the dead, that hypothesis makes the most sense. So this argument is sound and valid, therefore Jesus rose from the dead. So I'll just make 2 very quick application points and then we close, because this is simply not an intellectual thing, right? We can make a historical case for the resurrection of Jesus and go, but what does that mean for us as Christians? That is very, very important. So maybe you have come here to find answers, historical answers to this question of the resurrection of the dead, but there is more to just apologetics. There is more to just knowing the facts of the resurrection. There is more to just knowing how you defend your faith against people who attack the faith on the resurrection of Jesus. The resurrection of Jesus has practical implications, and with those practical implications I would like to close the seminar. The first practical implication for the resurrection of Jesus is that the resurrection of Jesus gives us hope in the face of death. Now, death is considered to be our greatest enemy. All of us are afraid of death, right? Now, practically speaking, let's leave aside the hope that we get in Christ Jesus. Apart from the hope we have in Christ Jesus, death is probably the greatest enemy. Now, if Jesus rose from the dead, then it means there is hope. Death is not the end. Death is not the end, right? There is an afterlife. If Jesus Christ rose from the dead, in fact, John 11:25 says, Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, though he dies, shall live. That's the hope that the resurrection message gives us, right? Death may, it comes to all of us. It's just a matter of time. Some may live 80 years, some 90, some 40, some 50, some 60, right? What gives us hope is the fact that Jesus rose from the dead. It is the hope that we have in Christ Jesus, that one day that we ourselves will defeat death. When Christ comes again, and that is also possible only because he rose from the dead. When he comes again, death will be defeated. Like how Jesus defeated death on the cross by rising from the dead, we will also one day rise from the dead and be with Christ forever and ever. Isn't that a wonderful message? That is actually the message of Easter, right? We're celebrating the resurrection of Jesus, but the resurrection of Jesus is not simply a theory, it is not simply a historical fact. It is a huge theological and spiritual thing that has happened in history, that Christ has taken your place and my place on the cross, but then death did not defeat him. He has taken our sins, and our sins were imputed to him on the cross, but with his resurrection comes our resurrection as well. So our death is not the end. We may fear death, but there is hope. There is hope. I think no other religion gives you that hope. The hope that Christ Jesus gives us is so immense, because it's not simply a theory, it's not simply a matter of a philosophy. It is a matter of spiritual significance, that death is defeated, and it is made possible by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And in fact, that is exactly what the Apostle Paul says in the same chapter, 1 Corinthians 15. And I'll just read the last part. He says, "Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is thy victory? O death, where is thy sting?" Right? The Apostle Paul could stand before the Roman governor and say that Jesus rose from the dead. And if that means you put me to the death, I'm willing to take it. Why? Because death is not the end. There is hope. You're just simply taking my body away, but I'm going to live with my God forever and ever and ever. And that is made possible only because of the historical fact that Jesus rose from the dead. But that is not the only spiritual implication or practical implication that you can take from the resurrection of Jesus. It's also the fact that Jesus' resurrection promises physical and psychological healing. Now, all of us are going through physical battles with health, with deformity, with troubles. Our body is aging. Every day, as every day passes by, we are getting older and older and older. Right? The world is not helping us either. It is also getting old with us. Right? But you know what? The resurrection of Jesus gives us not only hope in the matters of death, is saying that one day all your physical troubles will come to an end. We will no longer have any physical trouble. When Christ comes again, because of the fact that Jesus rose from the dead, there is an end to our physical suffering. There is an end to our physical suffering. It's just a matter of time, right? Physical suffering will come to an end. Likewise, it's not physical suffering alone. Psychological healing will also happen one day. Right? When Christ, when we believe in the resurrection of Christ, we believe that not only our body is transformed into the, in like how Jesus' body was transformed, but also our mind will also be healed. Think about the immense psychological issues that our generation is facing right now, right? With families, with workplaces. There is an end. The resurrection of Jesus Christ promises not only physical healing, but also psychological healing. There will come a day when, there will be no physical deformity, there will be no aging, there will be, complete restoration. And the restoration is possible because of the resurrection of Jesus. All right, so with that, I've made the case for the resurrection of Jesus, and I've also given you some practical implications for the resurrection. So now, we have gone over time, but I'm willing to wait and answer your questions on this topic. Now, even if it is any other topic also, it's not a problem. Yeah.